So one of the inspirational ideas is to do word association, like we did over here, and then to begin to categorize words and move words around. For some people, this is a very effective process. Other people, I've seen design teams do it. And if you're not a strong word person, if words don't quickly conjure ideas or images in your mind, that might not be a good process for you. But if you do get on design teams, you'll see this often used. Other ideas for inspiration. Are you in a creative environment? Look around you. If you're trying to think up creative stuff and you're sitting in a non-creative environment, somebody give me an example of a non-creative environment.
In your room, maybe 4 walls.
Maybe in your room with 4 walls around you. Okay, so if you're not in a creative environment, get in a creative environment. What is a creative environment?
Outside, in nature, maybe.
In nature? Okay.
People
around other people who like share your passion for design.
Absolutely. Get around some other people that are creative and open-minded, and maybe they've got pink hair. Have you been in my office? Can you see how I try to make that a creative environment? When I had my design studio, the conference table, I had toys. I had a Magic 8 Ball, I had a Slinky, I had a Rubik's Cube, but I always was putting to it. We did those bolo, those things that have to string the ball that you do like that and hit. We had toys all the time out so we could play with them. I've been in other design studios. I went in a design studio one time. They had all these big couches all around, and they had stuffed animals on the couches. It was hysterical. And everybody had their favorite stuffed animal. But seriously, if you're not in a creative environment, how can you expect to be creative, Play. If you're not careful, you'll get so bogged down in trying to come up with an idea that you'll send yourself in circles. And if you get to that point, it's time to get up and play. And what I mean by play is go get on a swing, like in a kid's playground. Yeah. Don't just go out and take a walk. Play like you did when you were a kid. Go get in your niece's sandbox or something. Grab you up some clay. Always keep some clay or something like that you can move your hands. Because when you start doing this and try to mold a three-dimensional object, it uses a different part in your brain. And it lets up on that pressure and that stress that's trying to solve that problem. But play, okay? Maybe even a board game or something. Play a music instrument. And what you're doing when you play, once again, is you're changing where in your mind all that energy is going. It's a physiological thing that you're doing. And you're opening yourself up to this sort of energy that comes in and gives you, all of a sudden you'll be in the middle of swinging on a swing and you'll go, oh my God, I got it. And you'll jump off the swing and you'll run and you'll be excited. Yay! I can't tell if y'all are smiling or not because everybody looks like banditos in here. Okay, so play. Another way to get inspiration, historical references. For instance, you're working on a project right now where you can access historical references, aren't you? So if you're 20 years old, you're going to go back 20 years. Things in history are going to look different then, aren't they? So imagine if you went back 100 years and started looking at imagery from 100 years ago, looking at typefaces, colors, old photographs. So historical references are a good way to jumpstart your brain. Another historical reference is the work of graphic designers. Because there were graphic designers in the 1920s, 30s, 40s, 50s who were producing really cool work. And if you're designing something that's intended for someone who's maybe my age, 112, imagine going back 112 years ago or 100 years ago and referencing some sort of historical information that I would immediately recognize. It would resonate with me. How quickly are you going to engage me in that design if it's speaking my language? So historical references are good. Sketch. Just make a mark. If you sit there doing this, if you try to put all of that pressure on your brain to come up with a solution, do you think that's fair to your brain? No, that's not fair. That's mean. So start sketching. Just get your sketchbook out. You don't have to sketch about the project. You just have to start sketching. Once again, it's like taking clay and moving it with your hands. Suddenly, your mind switches gears and opens itself up, possibly for inspiration. You're going to do an inspiration board in this first project. It can be digital, but I don't do digital inspiration boards. When I'm really working on a project, it's hard copy, printed out, stuck all over the wall. That is because when you do digital, it's this big, right? And it's this far away from you, right? But when you do all over the wall, you can back up, you can go away from it for a while, you can walk by and go get a glass of water and go, oh man, I didn't even notice that. Someone else might walk in and see it and say, you know what that reminds me of? And they say something and you go, oh my God, that's a great idea. So I like to use physical reality to do my inspiration boards. If you want to do that here, what I suggest is you get a big sheet of paper, maybe a couple of them, stick them up with thumbtacks, and as you find stuff, cut it out and glue it. That way you can take your boards down if you need to. Let's see. Search your creative inventory. You probably don't have much of a creative inventory right now, but what does inventory suggest? What have you got if you've got an inventory?
You have not like extra.
Got extra?
More of them, like different, ideas, something like that.
Yeah, and they're stored somewhere, aren't they? If you've got an inventory, you got a bunch of stuff stuck in some boxes and stored away somewhere. So I have boxes of crap, just boxes. And sometimes when I'm really on the struggle bus, I'll go through those boxes and I'll just start going through pieces of ephemera. You know what ephemera is? Just little, everything from menu, I'm about to die, I can't breathe. Everything from menus from restaurants to people's business cards to exhibition gallery programs to everything just stuffed in that box. But I have an inventory. Another thing I've got is how many thousand photographs do you have on your files right now, in your clouds? If you had to guess.
How many photographs?
How many photographs?
I know I have like at least 1,000.
Huh?
I said I know I have at least 1,000.
Yeah, at least 1,000. I wouldn't be surprised if some of y'all had like 8,000, 9,000 photographs. That's okay. If those photographs, though, are always of like maybe your friends or something, start thinking about taking photographs. Like I was out one time, I was downtown in the city one time, and across a parking lot that had a chain over it and everything, I saw some peeling text on a panel. And I mean, I'm like looking around because, I'm about to trespass. But I was hell-bent on getting a photograph of that peeling paint of that type. And I did. And it turned out to be a really cool photo. But I keep it not as some beautiful photograph, but it's reference material. It's inventory. So be aware all the time of what's around you. And if you see something cool, you don't have to frame it up and make it perfect. Just snap a picture of it. You never know when that might become a background or the main inspiration for a project. You got to have an inventory, though, to do that. One of my favorite ways of getting inspired, I call it opposites. And what that means is, if you've got something you're working on, let me think of something. All right, let's say the concept of your song is heartbreak, right? The concept is heartbreak. And you're like going, heartbreak, that's gonna be like a heart broken in half, that's too literal. Ugh. What's the opposite of heartbreak?
Love.
Is it love?
Togetherness.
Maybe togetherness? Happiness?
Sadness.
Sadness is the opposite of heartbreak?
No. I got something else. My bad.
So by thinking completely opposite of your concept, or even thinking completely opposite of the principle that you're trying to communicate, start sketching. All right, you said together, all right? So if you're heartbroken, I see two things that are apart, right? If you're together, there's two things that are together. So how could the principle of balance show symmetrical balance, asymmetrical? You see how you can start. So opposites is always it's a pretty fail-safe way to get yourself out of a rut, out of a design rut if you need to. And you'll see me put it in action one day. One of you will come and say, Ms. Robertson, da-da-da-da, and I'll say, so what's the opposite of that? And you'll go, well, that'll make no sense. And then you'll start thinking about it. And then you start looking for abstract access into what that opposite looks like, and it'll inspire you to go back to whatever it was you were doing. But it's kind of like a jolt. And one I don't have on here is called intersections. And what an intersection means, well, what happens when you get to an intersection? Like you're driving, you get to an intersection.
A crossroads.
You're at a crossroads, so what happens?
You choose which way to go.
You what?
You choose which way to go.
You have to make a decision about which way to go, right? What else happens when you get to an intersection?
You stop.
You stop, hopefully.
You, before you get there,
Huh?
slow down before you get there.
You do what before you get there?
Slow down.
You slow down. What else happens at an intersection? Doesn't always happen in an intersection, but oftentimes it does.
Accident.
An accident if you don't slow down or stop, right? What happens? Here I come, I'm driving up to an intersection.
Another car is coming.
Exactly. Somebody's coming from another direction, aren't they?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, here I am, Susan Robertson, old white lady. Got set in my own ideas, don't I? Been living this way for 120 years, and by God, this is the way we're going to do it, right? Here comes Caitlin. Totally different, young generation, just grew up different than me, has a different skill set than I have. We come up to the intersection, boom. That's what I'm getting at. Intersections create connections. Another example of it is that you're in design, right? Maybe you're working on a problem, and maybe it is to create navigational signage for a therapeutic, one of those places where old people go to get therapy, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So maybe your job is to create the signage for that facility so that old people or infirm people can find their way around. What would happen if you crossed your ideas with the ideas from someone, let's say, from archaeology? Would you ever think about sitting down with an archaeologist to talk about signage for an old